About 45 minutes left here in the show. We're going to bring in Mike Frankel of SNJ today. Been doing a lot of high school sports coverage this year, and obviously with the new SNJ Today highlight show, a lot of high school football this fall. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Hey, guys. How we doing? Happy Thanksgiving.
Good. Same to you. Big sports weekend, obviously, in terms of football. Got it started with the high school stuff. A lot of cool college games yesterday and today. Kind of a football fan's dream this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you always have your high school football, college football to go along with your turkey and stuffing, right? And we had a lot of great highlights the other day. Obviously, a ton of great games. I know you were over at the EHT mainland game where that one went down to the wire, and Bob Coffey rides off into the sunset with a victory. So just a great story there. And, you know, tons of great games around the area. Some of them was not as close as we thought they might be. One was, Cedar Creek, St. Augustine, and a lot of people sort of circled that one as the game of the day. But always an interesting dynamic when you have the one team that has something to play for the following week, which is Cedar Creek. Obviously, they have a South Jersey title to play for. And, that was pretty much St. Augustine's Super Bowl, if you will. I mean, they took the hard loss in the non-public playoffs, and that was their final game of the season. So, obviously, the Hermits run away with that one. So, not as close as I think a lot of fans would have liked, but, still a beautiful day for high school football, and it was great to be outside covering all the action.
Give us some of your impressions. I know you're there for most of the first half of mainland EHT. All that pregame stuff with Coach Coffey, he was kind of getting a little misty-eyed, and knowing his career was going to be over in a couple hours. And you've been around this league for a long time, the Cape Atlantic League, and you've covered a lot of Bob Coffey games. Give us some of your thoughts on him and his career and how it had finished up.
Yeah, obviously. Well, in terms of the game itself, we'll start with that. I mean, it's pretty hard after everything that happened pregame, all the ceremonies and stuff. I think it's only natural that a team might come out a little bit flat, which is what you saw Mainland do. I mean, EHT was able to run for a long touchdown to start that game before Mainland was able to take control, and then obviously it went back and forth from there. But in terms of Bob Coffey, yeah, I had a chance to cover him for about 8 to 9 years to 10 years, and a couple things stick out. Obviously, it's the way he sort of handled and led that community after the tragic death of those 4 mainland boys a couple years back. People were looking at, in many cases, people looked to the high school football coach to sort of be a leader. And Bob's a quiet guy, but he led the right way. He got that community through that tough time as best that you can. Obviously, you can never really get through it fully, but he did his best there. And I know the team sort of honored those boys for that year and for many of the years to come. So that obviously sticks out to me. Another key moment was the state championship that they won. I think it was 2008, the undefeated season, and just the way they took everyone's best punch on the football field that year. And even in the state championship game, South Jersey championship game, I should say, they went up 21-0 on Southern, and, they hung on to win it, and a great scene there. And even in some losses, I think the year before they lost to Toms River North on the road in the state championship game, and it was maybe a year ahead for them, and they still battled, and, they fought hard, and that's always what you got from those mainland teams coached by Bob Coffey. Whether they were the favorite or the underdog, they always seem to come out prepared, ready to go, and never an easy out, let's say.
We're talking with Mike Frankel of SNJ today. Mike, we just had on Dennis Thomas, head football coach at Millville, talking about that rivalry, and, if you're not from that area, maybe you don't get it, but what a cool rivalry. It's been going on for over 100 years. Talk a little bit about that and what that means to those two communities. I mean, obviously, it's one of those rivalries, kind of like Michigan, Ohio State, where you just, for that whole week, you're just, mainland people aren't wearing blue and orange, and Millville people aren't wearing red, and you have, families divided and all that stuff going on.
Yeah, a lot of interesting dynamics with that rivalry in terms of the history. I mean, it goes back further than just about any other South Jersey rivalry. I believe it's the oldest one, and it's one of the oldest ones in the country. So just a lot of interesting things to consider. I mean, you go back to the start of that thing in the late 1800s, and, the two towns are close, but that's obviously well before the modes of transportation they were used to. So just to think about maybe how the one team even got to the other team's field, did they go by horse and carriage? I mean, but honestly, that's something to consider. And, yeah, it's been, a lot of great battles over the years. So many great stories. In fact, for SNJ today, I had a chance to sort of dive into that stuff last year. We put together a documentary called The Rivalry, exploring the history of it a little bit, and got to talk to some older guys and some coaches on both sides. And it did get a little heated there for a few years, but then a couple new coaches stepped in. I think it was late 70s, 80s, and sort of quieted that down a little bit. I mean, stopped sort of the brawling and the fighting during and after the games, and it became much more civil, which is the way it should be. And, no incidents like that really to speak of since then. But, yeah, it's always a battle, and it is cliche, but you can kind of throw the records out the window there because that is the game that people in those communities remember. And, I had a chance to talk to Raquel Armstead last year. Obviously, he's doing big things for Temple right now, but he said a lot of his family was from Vineland, and he obviously played for Millville. So win or lose, he had to go home later that day at the Thanksgiving table and sort of hear some of that trash talk, or maybe he got a chance to talk some of that trash. So obviously, the bloodlines run deep there, and there's people that have been on both sides, whether playing on one side, coaching on the other, and obviously a lot of respect, and those games are always so packed. I mean, like I said, it doesn't matter what the records are. I mean, there's always hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people at those football games.
What are some of the cool stories you heard from some of the old-timers about that rivalry going back, 30, 40 years?
Well, some of them had to do with weather. I mean, there was one year, I think this was maybe late 80s, early 90s, and there was a big snowstorm the night before, and they were ready to play. They cleared the fields. The roads were horrible, but they had cleared the fields. I think Tony Serace, former coach of Millville, was telling me this. And so they were ready to go, but for some reason Vineland had heard that the game was canceled. So Millville's warming up on the field, and Vineland just never showed up. So they had to push the game a couple days, and they ended up playing, I think, on a Saturday that year. And if you go back maybe 30 or 40 years before that, I was talking to another older guy on the Millville side, and there was some heavy rain going on, and it had been a rain-filled fall, and Millville, they had the distinction of being mudders that year. You talk about horse mudders, well, Millville was good in the mud. So apparently the story I got was that Vineland didn't want to play them on a rainy day, so they had to push the game to a sunny day, but Millville was still able to win that one. So just stuff like that, and neat things on both sides, and even talking about the uniforms and the history of that, and how you go back and you think about those early pictures of those leatherhead football helmets, and that stuff obviously was all included in that Vineland-Millville rivalry.
Another really cool rivalry that doesn't get a lot of attention, maybe because the teams aren't as successful as some of the other teams around here, is the Anchor Bowl down there in Lower Cape May and Middle Township. Really, really cool rivalry down there. Those guys get really psyched up for that game, and this year they came in with a combined 3 wins, but always kind of a fun game to finish up the season down there in Cape May County.
Yeah, so many rivalries like that across South Jersey, but that's certainly an interesting one. And yeah, there's 2 communities all the way basically at the tip of Cape May, southern part of the state, and yeah, that's another big time rivalry game. It may not go back as far as Vineland-Millville, but just as much pride on the line in that one, and it's good to see that game back and being played again. I think a couple of years back, Lower Cape May was going through a little bit of a tough time, and they dropped down to a junior varsity schedule, and they didn't get a chance to play that game. And I know that was a huge disappointment to both of those communities. So I think they picked it up last year or the year before, and obviously they played this year, and Middle Township got the win. But yeah, same deal. I mean, it's one of those situations where it doesn't matter what you did during the regular season. If you can win that game, your seniors go out on a high note. The community is going to remember that, and that's the case for Middle Township this year. So just so many of those big-time rivalries. I mean, you go up outside of the Cape Atlantic League, and you have a Haddon Heights-Haddonfield rivalry. That goes back so many years. And you have Salem-Woodstown out in Salem County. So just a ton of these great games. And, you talk so much about, I guess me talk, I should say, these days is whether these games should still exist. And, again, sort of a weird deal because you have the playoffs coming up, and, you have this regular season game on Thanksgiving. Do you want to play on a holiday? And I understand both sides, but for me, I've always been a big proponent of these games, a lot of tradition involved, and I think the teams that still play on that day, the communities really enjoy that event.
We're talking with Mike Frankel of SNJ today. Mike, looking ahead to next weekend, any games really stand out that you're really looking forward to in these state championship games? You got, obviously, from the Cape Atlantic League, Cedar Creek versus undefeated number 1 West Deptford. We still have St. Joe Hamilton. They're going to be taking on Hudson Catholic. But you also got some pretty good matchups in South Jersey Group 4 and Group 5. Timber Creek versus Shawnee in Group 4. Toms River North and Williamstown in Group 5. And even in Group 3, Delsey's been on a roll, and they're going to face a real tough team in Camden. Give us some quick thoughts about next weekend and where you're going to be at, first of all.
Well, I'll be at Rowan, camped out at least all day Saturday, and SNJ today will be there both days. I'm not sure who will be there Sunday for us. But
you might have to get a dorm room over there for the weekend.
Yeah, I might as well, right? I think you can look at basically every matchup that weekend. I mean, start all the way down in South Jersey Group 1. Cool stories on both sides, really. I mean, you have Clayton, small, tiny school who's never really had any postseason success. They host their first 2 home playoff games this year, win them both. They're in the final. You go to the other side, Pennsville, and a lot of people know the story there is that those kids are playing for their teammate that was critically injured before the season, Kyle Zenny, not able to play all season long, just really battling for his life, to be honest. And
right.
Such an inspiration there. So that should be a great matchup. Group 2, like you said, Cedar Creek versus West Deptford. It's a rematch of a game we saw a couple years ago. And West Deptford's undefeated, and no disrespect to the Eagles. I mean, they don't play the toughest schedule. Certainly they've taken care of business there, but I think it'll be a really interesting matchup. I'm not sure there's a favorite there. I think both teams pretty even going into that one.
Be interesting to see if West Deptford can hang with the athletes that Cedar Creek has. I think weather might play a big part in that. If it's nice out, Cedar Creek likes to sling that ball around, and with guys like Bo Melton and Amir Mitchell and all the other guys they have, that could be a real tough matchup for West Deptford.
Yeah, it'll be a contrast of styles. West Deptford, they love to run that offense they've been doing forever there, and they have a lot of guys they can get the ball to, and they'll keep it on the ground for the most part. I mean, their quarterback, Nick Biacco, is a good athlete. He can throw the ball as well, but, it's going to be ground and pound for West Deptford side, and as we know, the Pirates like to sling it around. So, yeah, interesting contrast of styles there. And, Delsea Camden, that's a rematch in Group 3 of a game earlier this season in Delsea that came down to the wire, and the Crusaders won it there. So that's the rematch, if you will. Group 4, Timber Creek, Shawnee. It seems like these teams are always going at it. Timber Creek, a great story because they took a few losses this year to good teams, and they were close losses. But, ho-hum, the Chargers are back in the South Jersey Championship game, I think, for the 5th year in a row. And then, to be honest, I'm not sure what to expect in South Jersey Group 5. I haven't seen Toms River North play yet this year. They're a little bit outside our coverage area in terms of SNJ today. But I know Williamstown, really a tough team. I mean, they took a loss on Thanksgiving against Washington Township, a team that they just beat a couple of weeks earlier in the playoffs. Not sure what the situation there. I don't know if they played all their guys. Again, another interesting scenario where you don't know how hard a team's going to go because they have a championship game to play the following week. But so that'll be interesting. And then I think St. Joe on the non-public side is a heavy favorite against Hudson Catholic. But you never know. You got to see what happens on the field.
Good stuff. Thanks for taking a few minutes this morning, Mike. And we'll be seeing you out there next weekend at Rowan.
All right, guys. I'm going to get back to my turkey sandwich leftover.
There you go. That was Mike Frankel of SNJ today.